think.
Yeah.
Now, when I heard that, I thought Kashmir stroke James Bond.
Yeah,
So
there's definitely a film music thing going on there, like a rock mixed with orchestra. You know,
Yeah.
like we've been doing that bits and pieces over the years, but I think this is where the first song where we've really got like a monstrous kind of riff going, and then managed to get the orchestra going around it. And we've always been into film music. You know?
Yeah.
I'd say it's definitely a John Barry. There's a little wink to John Barry on the string arrangement, which I did. It has this little, actually has a little,
Yeah, right.
a little wink in John Barry's
An
direction.
homage.
Yeah. And at the very end, I play another little wink to to Sean Connery.
And we'll play it now, but just before we do, because that's always a thing that comes through with your music, is that you're not frightened of pushing it to an extreme and actually having a bit of a laugh with it. You know, you're not that poor-faced about it, are you?
Well, I think having fun is you know, we're definitely having a lot of fun on stage and in the studio. You know, I think that's the way to describe it. We're not necessarily creating gags, you know what I mean? But there's definitely an element of just having a good time.
Yeah, it's not half man, half biscuit. Not yet, though. Maybe in the next few albums we'll see that influence come through. Let's hear Supremacy now. Supremacy from the new album, The Second Law by Muse. And we should touch on that as well. We've one of our regular contributors, Professor Brian Cox. I forgot to ask him. I spoke to him today. I was going to ask him about the second law of thermodynamics, which is what that's basically the basis of the title, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you describe to the non-Coxians among us vaguely what it means?
I'd much rather hear Cox describe it. I'm sure
I know, it's a shame.
He'll
pretty
give
well,
a far more. What was it? The thing behind it's not really when we're making the album. The news was always, it still is actually. It just seems to be obsessed with financial crisis, financial meltdown, and environmental problems and all that kind of stuff. You know, so I was trying to, I was trying to remember what I learned in school about energy and how that affects, in particular lack of energy. I remember being in school and learning about peak oil, the concept of oil running out, and environmental consequences, all that kind of stuff. And I remember the laws of thermodynamics. Second law is the one that tells us that essentially energy is running out in an isolated system, which our solar system is pretty much isolated. Energy is gradually declining, and it seems to be in every isolated body, like our human body, obviously, in the universe in general, and so on. This is where Cox should step in with a real serious correction. I think I can say we're not a closed system. We're open to the Earth, and the Earth is open to the Sun. But the solar system is a closed system. Yeah. So basically energy is declining. So it seems like I became interested in the idea that that human life, evolution, if you know what I mean, is really a battle against this inevitable problem. That seems to be that we seem to be living in. The laws of physics seems to be against us. We want to grow and expand and evolve. Whereas the universe, well, in particular our solar system, is saying, you know what, it's all running out. So I kind of got interested in this kind of expansion and collapse, and the idea of like pushing to the limits and failing and then collapsing again and so on. So songs like Survival are kind of like the extreme of that, like the sort of like extreme expansion and wanting to evolve and survive. And then songs like Explorers kind of sing about the more kind of collapsing side of the equation. So it's it just seemed like a good way. The second law seemed like a good kind of way of summarising what kind of the theme is on the album.
I mean, people must pick up on this a lot, but lyrically there are these themes kind of come through quite a lot of common thread. Sort of you get a feeling of global panic, of destruction and conspiracy and stuff like that. Is that fair to say? Do you think? And what do you think that comes from? Is that just stuff that you're interested in?
I watch my favourite. I just watch BBC News Channel 24. Whenever we're travelling around the world somewhere, it seems to be the only channel that's in English a lot of the time. There's a lot of these hotels, so I've got to say it's BBC News' fault.
But on other tracks as well, we're getting a bit of sexy Muse, we're getting a bit of disco Muse.
Little groove.
I'm thinking of Panic Stations.
Yep.
That reminds me of it. Have you heard The Hardest Part by Blondie? Have you ever heard that song?
No, I haven't heard that.
I think so.
It's like it sounds quite like it's like a real disco Blondie sort of.
Yeah, there's all sorts in that song. It's like it's a pretty standard sort of funk groove, isn't it? But there's a little bit of Chili Peppers in there.
Yeah.
There's
Scissor Sisters, maybe.
Get involved. Get involved.
We just wanted to let our hair down on that one. Have a laugh. But it's a little bit of Phil Collins on the drum sound as well, I'd say.
Almost a bit of weird Primus influence on the bass sound and the way it's played. Slap bass, and I think I think that song particularly kind of just reminded us of our youth somehow when we started playing it. So we used to play, I don't know, I think when we were young we used to kind of do a lot more with that kind of bass sound, and that kind of way of playing, which we certainly stopped doing when we got to Showbiz and probably Origin Symmetry. So we just thought we'd bring it back. And then as soon as we started playing that groove and that line, which is very kind of fun and slightly disco-like or something like that, and funky, just reminded us of being young and having fun. So we wanted to kind of produce it in that way and make it sound, you know, upbeat,
danceable,
and danceable and like party style. Yeah.
And then
there's definitely a bit of groove on this album, I'd say.
Yeah.
We've been trying to bring that in since around about the second, third album. We've sort of always felt that, you know, rock bands or, you know, indie bands, whatever you want to call it, like, you know, don't always pay attention to the groove, you know.
Yeah,
so on this
yeah.
album, I think almost every song we were like trying to make the groove and the riff like the most important thing, you know.
It's a nice tight rhythm section, of course, that you've got to ride on there as well, haven't you? And Madness as well. It's somebody was saying dubstep Muse or something ridiculous like that. But do you guys, have you had to grow a thick skin over the years? Because you do get some brickbats from critics, don't you? Because I think that a lot of critics just think these guys are crazy, you know. They're out there. And how do you sit with that? Are you at peace with it, or does it still get on your wick when people do that?
I don't think we're that far out. Do you know what I mean? But to us, I think we're pretty all right, you know.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, I mean, maybe it's a sign of, you know, maybe things are a little bit conservative out there, you know. I mean, I kind of feel like we haven't. I think some bands or some artists tend to like associate their identity with a production approach. You know, we have this guitar sound and that kind of bass and this kind of drum and that kind of vocal.
Yeah.
You know, and their band or their artist concept becomes a production approach, whereas we've never really been, you know, we've been prepared to take completely different production approaches that involve different instruments and completely different performance techniques and sounds, you know, to what we, you know, just guitar, bass and drums, if you know what I mean. So that's one reason why I think our albums end up being so diverse, because the last two albums we produced ourselves, you know, so for that reason we're sort of quite creative in that area on the production side. It's always, I remember when we did Origin, I mean, to me it didn't seem that weird, but I remember reading a review in NME or something, and they were saying like, sounds like a madman pulling out his brains and throwing them against a wall for us to look at what shapes it makes. And I was going like, what? I was like, that can't. That's, you know, I didn't realise it was that far out. You know, maybe some people are very conservative. You know.
Yeah. Well, The Second Law is a fantastic album. It's the latest album from Muse. It's out on Monday, and Catch the Boys on tour. You can even get a seat behind Dom's backside, which is probably the best seat in the house. But congratulations on a great record, boys, and thanks for coming in.
Cheers,
Thank you very much.
BBC Six Music.